Daryl Recommends Podcast is a podcast recommending series and shouldn't be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each show are my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
Hello, faithful listeners. Welcome to our Advising Community segment, where we interrupt the continuous broadcast to talk to you, our wonderful listeners. If you missed our announcements earlier this week, you're probably expecting the dulcet tones of Madame Marie. Unfortunately, she has not returned from wherever she's gone to. I had been hoping that at least one of the loyal assistants would turn up and fulfil their duties to the Advice and Community segment, but alas, none of them have. Madame Marie would be very disappointed. She did care about the show more than life itself, as she would frequently proclaim, whilst bathing and occasionally while walking down the fresh good aisle in Sainsbury's. I had also hoped that the reason I hadn't heard from them was because they'd just been like, oh, it's just Sam, we don't need to tell him anything. This too being one of Madame Marie's favourite things to extol. Janet, Salim and Astrid have had a lot of experience on the air, and I've had, well, none, to be honest. But, faithful listeners, I am just so excited to be here. I've worked with Madame Marie and her loyal assistants for years, but I'm lucky if they let me into the recording room, even just to bring them a cup of tea. Usually, my job is about organising...
Temporary host Sam Enfield is put in charge of running Spirit Box Radio after the disappearance of the mysterious Madame Marie. But as Sam runs the show, strange things start to happen to the radio, and Sam's destiny may be bigger than he thinks. Spirit Box Radio is a show created by Era Major of Hanging Sloth Studios. The show features a cast of queer characters and explores a world where the arcane is closer than you think. Spirit Box Radio is 3 seasons of roughly 100-ish episodes and is completely finished, ending now with retrospective episodes done by Era himself. So this was a show that I listened to, I would say pretty early on in my podcast listening expedition. I didn't have many shows I listened to before it, but I had like a nice handful, and this was one that I saw going around, and so I really liked the cover because the cover for like the little thumbnail they use on Spotify is really pretty, and they were near the end of season 1, so I was like, yeah, I'll give this a listen, and I really like it. It's a very warm, cozy show despite being a horror podcast. It does get very depressing at times, and stuff does get sad and kind of fucked up, but it's just, I don't know what it is, whether it's just the narration or just Sam as a character who's this kind of like, I would say the most morally gray, nice, kind boy I've ever seen in a podcast character. Sunshine boy who will just as readily kill you if the thing has to happen, I guess. But the show is very good, and the vibes for it are just great for like Halloween. It's very much like a fall listen. Like, sometimes, like, with certain podcasts, I'll, like, assign seasons that are, like, the best way to listen to them, in my opinion, just because the vibes are right. This is definitely a show that gives me, like, early fall into Halloween kind of vibes. Just nice, warm, and cozy. And it's filled with a bunch of fun references to things, such as BuzzFeed Unsolved and the Magnus Archives. I like trying to find little bits of just stuff that Era's slipped in as the show continues on, and it's just great. The characters are nice, and the complicated plots are good. Not in a I don't understand what's happening kind of way. It's very much a like red string conspiracy board type of show, where a lot of stuff are connected. But one of the things that I like about that is that it's not too much, which is something that I feel like can get in the way with some shows, is you add too much stuff that is all over the place. It's very hard to get it all connected together in a way that makes sense. It does the thing that like the Magnus Archives does, where it's just it gets condensed. It gets condensed. Like, it starts off seeming very, very big, and then it's like, oh no, like everything is a lot more condensed than you think it is. And the more into the show you listen to, the more like easier it is to understand stuff that's going on. What I'm saying is, it's basically it builds up its mystery very good. Especially with Sam, because Sam's whole thing in, like, season 1 is like, oh, Madame Marie never wanted me to run this radio show because I have no arcane talent. I'm horrible at the arcane. She's always telling me that. So she had me run the P.O. box, and I love the radio show, that I always wanted to run it, and so she's gone. I'm going to run it for her. Hopefully she won't be mad at me. But I'm not as great of a arcanist as she is. And it starts off from there. And then it goes... everything going downhill a lot. It's It's a fun time. It's a really fun time. If you like shows where it's like Happy Sunshine Boy, now insert the angst and the trauma, and we have Sunshine Boy ready to commit horrible crimes. You'll understand when you go and listen to the show. Go listen to the show. And if you're somebody who needs a queer cast of characters, the whole cast is queer. I don't think there's a straight person at all in the main cast. Like, Sam, for example, he's trans, and he's also pansexual. And he's got, like, an asexual sister, he's got another sister who's a lesbian, and it's just a whole queer cast of characters. Sam gets himself a boyfriend. It's great. Just one of the things with this is a horror show. I personally don't think it's really scary. If you're somebody who's, like, doesn't like scary audio, it's, like... I know that it's kind of like a term that some people don't like, but I consider it like cozy horror. It's very like, these vibes are spooky, sometimes they get a little unnerving, sometimes they get like a little like horror in the way of like, that's revolting, but not necessarily in the way of like, say how Malevolent or the Magnus Archives can get like full-on scary. There is a huge theme of death though. Death is a very big theme in this show, and there is one scene where a character gets their throat slit at the end of the first season. Just if that's like, if viscera is not a thing you like, there's also some in like season 3, but not a lot of it. It's like, I would say like maybe like 2, possibly 3 episodes have like viscera noises in it, but they're not like incredibly graphic with the exception of the throat slitting scene. But that's like at the end of season 1, so if you're not into that, just be warned. I'm pretty sure there's content warnings on each of the episodes, so if you need to, take a look at those, please do. But it's not necessarily, like, an incredibly graphic show that's just, like, think Malevolent. It's definitely a lot less graphic than the Magnus Archives, and the Magnus Archives is mostly just a lot of narration, which is what a lot of this show is, too. It's Sam narrating a lot of stuff, mostly just, like, letters and things that he's getting, or sometimes stuff he's looking at in the crystal ball, because there's a crystal ball that he looks at in the first season. And I keep mentioning the first season. I don't want to get too much into the second season. Yeah, that's a thing. It also mentions a lot of like emotional abuse and child negligence. Not necessarily like, like abusive parents doing physically abusive stuff, but like it's very obvious early on in season 1 that like Sam has been emotionally abused. And they later go into like Sam's childhood and his sister's childhood, because his sisters are older than him. They're both adults, and like how they're both dealing with that and their complicated relationship with their mother, and more things that you will learn about as you go into the show. Not a lot of stuff that I want to like spoil with it. Yeah, it's just a very nice show. And one of the things I also really like about it is kind of just like what it does was, because season 1 is like, okay, we know there's a mystery here, and so at the end, so there's a bunch of stuff that happens in season 1. You got the introduction with the characters, more stuff about like who Sam really is, and Sam's whole actual deal, and things like that. But then we get into season 2, and with season 2, it's like, okay, so Sam has a better idea of what that is. Now he needs to figure out what that means. So he goes on to that, and then season 2 ends with, okay, well, this is what that means. And then season 3 is like, so you know what you are. You know what that means. Now we have to decide what are you going to do with that information, which is kind of the big build-up into season 3, until you get to, like, one of the more climatic points of the show where things turn and kind of go to shit for a bit. And I think, like, because seasons 1 and 2, I believe, are both 40 episodes each. I know season 1 is. I think season 2 is either 40 or 39 episodes. I don't exactly remember. But season 3 is 15 episodes, which is very short. But also, like, thinking about it, with how season 2 leaves off, there isn't really too much left to do a huge 40-episode season with. I mean, like, I don't know if Era, like, originally intended for there to be another 40-episode season, and if, whatever he had planned for the plot, if he was going to do a full 40-episode season, However, I think with working, just keeping it confined into those 15 episodes, it still worked really good. I'm trying to say this in the way of, like, I don't think season 3 is too short, because the first 2 seasons are 40 episodes, and then you get to season 3, and it's like, well, why is season 3 only 15? So if you're worried about them, like, rushing through things, to me, it's like, it's a good pace. It's actually a really good pace, and I think that it works very well for the show, and just, like, it knows what it is, it knows what it needs to do to get there. And it's not necessarily like, oh, but we gotta keep doing the mystery, just like how season 1 and 2 is. You gotta keep doing the mystery. It's just very much just like, end of season 2. You know what's going on. You know what has to happen. Season 3 is, so what are you gonna do about it? And it's just very nice. It's very well put with how put together that they put season 3, and I don't know, because there's like a little bit of something going on in season 3 that could have been expanded into a bigger plot line. They don't go too much into it. It has something to do with, like, something happening in Salem, and they do, it's not left off at a place where it's like, wait a minute, but you brought this thing up, and now you just forgot about it. Like, they do kind of, like, wrap that up. It's just not, like, as, like, super... I think you'll understand when you listen to it. It's a plot line that they necessarily don't go too far into, and it's kind of there for a bit, and then it's gone. But it very much also kind of has to deal with some stuff that they went through in season 2. Not directly, but in the same vein as stuff they went through in season 2. So it being not as long or not as prominent of a plot line, to me, doesn't feel, like, jarring, because it also fits with just some of the stuff Sam's going through during season 3. So if, like, that's also another reason why I don't think season 3 being short is a bad thing, because I gave the show a whole re-listen before recording this, and I, even, like, when I was listening to season 3 as it was coming out, I didn't feel like it was too rushed. That's also kind of why I've been re-listening to some shows before making videos about them, is just to refresh myself on it. And yeah, I like the pacing of it, even if it is a shorter season. So I hope you guys will give the show a chance and go check it out. Of course, I'm going to be linking to Era's social medias, Hades Law Studio sites. I think Spiritbox Radio has a Twitter, don't quote me on that. You can always check my description and find the links below. And they also have a Patreon. I'll be linking to that as well. And if you guys have suggestions for podcasts to listen to, I will listen to them. I am listening to 2 shows right now. One, because it's a YouTube show. Half of it is, at least. The other one, at work, where I usually listen to podcasts. Yay! And, as always, you can follow me on social media down below. I am recording this on Trans Day of Visibility, so if you want a comic with trans main protagonists, 2 comics actually, you could go read both of them down below. In Harmony and The Shepherd of Oblivion, they both have trans protagonists. Go read my queer horror webcomic. Go read my sci-fi fantasy comic. Tell me what you think about them, if you do. And also go check out Spiritbox Radio. Go give it a listen. Go tell Era Major how amazing you think it is. And I will talk to you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.